And she drove me almost to tears, because as a practitioner, or whatever, as a scientist, we think that we can restore things from a biology perspective or an engineering perspective. And she said something that to me was one of the saddest things I've ever heard, which is, you can do a lot with those things, yes. You can never bring back the sacredness of that land to us. To me, I'll be honest, very honest, that changed my life. That changed how I see things, because it really resonated with me. And when I saw Martin and Mary speaking, one of the things that they talked about was that this spirit-driven approach and the ceremonial component that is bringing things back to the land and bringing the spirit back to the land, it sincerely gave me hope. And that was 1 year ago at the CIM conference, and I approached them and I just thanked them for the hope that they've given me, because I was sincerely saddened to hear about what was going on in the communities in Alberta. So to me, that is, from my point of view, why consultation is meaningful, but also how to do consultation in a meaningful way, not to me, but to the communities who should be consulted. I find it absurd that in Alberta we have a consultation policy that is dictated by the government without consultation with First Nations. It's almost like an irony, really. It's like a joke. Let's have a consultation policy without consultation. Anyways, that's, to me, I can only speak by my experience, but I'm getting directly involved with the project from a practice perspective, and I want to do whatever we possibly can to work together to develop something that is meaningful, both in forms of consultation and integration of traditional knowledge and Western science, which has a lot to do with also with what Chief Reg was speaking about. I don't know if that answers your question, but
thank you for having the courage to at least, give us an example. And how to answer that, like how to speak to that. It takes time, in my experience, to work on a relationship, a meaningful relationship, and knowing that the motivation behind it is restoration or restoration to original state in whatever whatever manner that's going to look like on both sides of the table. But how much energy and how much effort is put into ensuring it's not a profit-driven relationship. It's not an economic-driven relationship, because that's part of where, on our side of the table, that's our fear, is that this is purely for profit. We may benefit indirectly with some jobs. We may benefit indirectly with some opportunities, but we're not sort of necessarily always being recognized as experts in our field. In terms of the traditional knowledge that we have, are not recognized with a PhD or a Master's of Science. They are acknowledged, within our own communities as being sacred and vitally important to our future. But when it comes to that side of the table, it's not evidence-based research that's being acknowledged. And there's a variety of things missing in that. So as far as the trust, people not talking, I need to continue with this. Affirmative action is one element. Affirmative action, and this is something that's been a bone of contention on my end, just personally. There's not a lot of Aboriginal practitioners on that side of the table. There's a few, there's some, and few and far between. Whenever I talk to any Aboriginal relations outfit, with any industry player or even within government, there's like one or two people, or none whatsoever within those corporations. That's a problem on that side of the table. Our side of the table, we know what we need as far as our interests are concerned. We need to develop our own capacity around being able to sit on that side of the table. We need to work with you, or are your associations willing to acknowledge traditional knowledge, expertise on that side of the table without the evidence-based research that PhDs and scholars have? And that's something to take into consideration going forward. Oh, there's somebody back there. Yes?
I've got something to add. I probably don't need a microphone. I can probably speak loud enough. in reference to this, I've been working with Aboriginal people in the north of Australia on rehabilitation of the uranium mine, which is inside a World Heritage listed national park. And we started this project on tying together engineering, Western engineering principles and traditional knowledge for closure of the mine, which has commenced December of last year. Okay, so it's just gone into closure phase. And we started in 2006. It took us 7 years of hard work in an atmosphere of complete mistrust to actually get anywhere with it. The company is on board with it. We've got set closure criteria now for cultural attributes, which we needed to be able to integrate it back into the World Heritage Park, and for environmental attributes as well. And you're absolutely correct, it's taken 7 years, that's a long time just to get on board with people. And the relationship is still not good, okay? But it's workable and it's working. And I think the major thing that we've been able to do is actually tie the two together. It's not profit-based, there's absolutely no money in this for the company at all. Other than it may help them bring it to closure a bit earlier, because one of the key parts of closure is it must have assent from the people, the landowners, to actually be able to get their closure certificate. So there is work being done, and it's still probably in its infancy, and at some point I think it's probably valuable to get this exchange out with you guys and see where you can go from there, because okay, the systems are different, the culture's different, consultation was difficult, but really all it boiled down to is listening, saying, hey, you know, this is who I am, I'm here, what do you want? And build it from there. But I think if you follow the same sort of principles and make it site specific, you can probably come up with a similar sort of outcome.
Thank you, Joe. So maybe that's one of the things that we could probably put there. So if there are some things that cannot be done because of the law, so how could we start educating practitioners in what would be a better way to do things?
Okay, I just want to add on for a second to it, if you excuse me, for what David said. You know, companies spend a lot of time, you know, it's the best practice to win the trust of the community you're trying to work with. And so companies spend so much time trying to win the trust, but they don't trust the community. They don't trust the knowledge. They don't trust the motives. And, you know, you talked about there's like one Aboriginal person or First Nations or Métis person in every Aboriginal relations department. And as a non-Aboriginal appearing person, I hear all that cynicism. Oh, like, what's it going to take? Oh, you know, well, how much is it going to cost to replant this area? Like, there's so much cynicism, and yet companies want to go out there and say, oh, trust us. We want you to trust us. Like, we think you're full of shit, but, you know, trust us. You know, all this nuts. I hear people talk about nuts and berries, like, you know, really, really negative stuff. And so I think that companies have to be willing to trust as well. Not just say we want you to trust us because, you know, we're good guys.
I think one of the things that listening to this gentleman's comment is that number one is that accountability. How do we put accountability into place? That's a question that we should be asking. That accountability back home for my life, what gives any company that right to come in and impose on me that what we're doing is for the betterment of your community. So it's going to be good for you. 12 years later, they leave, and then there's this great big toxic dump in our backyard. But my other point is that the United Nations Declaration, how do we get that on the ground? How do we utilize that as a teacher to help us? A lot of work went into that. And you want to know what? I think it's a real shameful waste of energy and time that people had put a lot of deliberation into to represent Indigenous people of the world. And those principles that are in there are very powerful. But how do we incorporate that into what we're doing? When I think about that, and I think about this, even this IAIA gathering, I'm going, where's our Indigenous peoples? Where's our posters? Where is all of that? Back in 1997, not much has changed since that time. And I come to events like this and I'm going, oh, nothing's changed yet. Still talking about the same old thing, dancing to the same old tune. The one thing that has changed, and that is that Canada finally signed on to that declaration. And you want to know what? We need to make them live up to that. But not just the government, but industry, corporations, people that come into First Nations. You better understand what that means to you and how you're going to respect the First Nations in regards to what they consider as meaningful consultation. Thank you. I don't know if I answered your question.
Good. Good. You next. I can tell you're
I mean, the question's pretty loaded in general. I mean, all the, for the most part, I mean, the individuals here that are Aboriginal or First Nations are the presenters, and there's very few Aboriginal people who are participants. So, I mean, trying to ask us what the answer is, I mean, first of all, I mean, we're what, 7, 8 individuals who deal with this a lot, but really, I mean, unless these guys know the answers and are telling us, I don't know the answers, because basically we're trying to make the process work as we go. We're trying to learn from all of our mistakes. We're trying to set examples and best practices. Sorry, I shouldn't even say best practices, effective practices. Because saying best practices is basically saying that we know the answer. What we're looking for is what's effective for today, what's effective for tomorrow, and what will be effective in, say, 10, 20 years, and that's going to change. So how can IAIA assist that? I would say by really bringing the communities in, not just as the ones who are supposed to give the answers, but also to be here sitting around and discussing the issues, not in the Aboriginal issue or the consultation issue, but like the gentleman back there was saying, how do we look at consultation principles not as an Aboriginal-based issue, but as consultation practices and principles in general?
Human beings.
Thank you. Because we are human beings.
Yeah.
We still are. I'm not kidding about that, but I mean, really, we just want to be treated as individuals. Secondly, the really loaded part of this question is, what is consultation there for? I see it differently from, say, someone who just wants the win. So for us to say, this is the way to do consultation, I mean, you can look at, for all those people who are bad-mouthing Alberta's guidelines, the one thing they do guarantee is that if you want to do really bottom bar consultation, you can win. It's actually more detrimental to a company to fully engage with a First Nation, because essentially every time you set the bar higher for yourself, government holds you to that. So it's actually more effective for a company to say, follow the 21-day process, send out 1 or 2 notifications, and then file that record of consultation, because government will look at that and say, there's no commitments made, there's no long-term strategy, you guys got it on the ball. And does government follow the 21-day consultation policy? I've actually been in a meeting with one of the ministers who said, we're going to consult with you on this watershed management plan. We commit to this in December. August 31st, the watershed management plan is approved, and they haven't even talked to us. And I mean, Reg was there at that meeting, and he knows exactly what we're talking about. So, what is consultation? That's something that has to be defined by industry, because government sure is not going to give us a definition that works either for First Nations or for industry. And also set the bar high identify what your expectations are and work with your project teams, work with your companies to have them understand that just because they're setting the bar high and that potentially they're opening up liability for themselves, that even though they're doing that, it leads to long-term effects. And I mean, for myself, I know I'm probably going over the 5-minute mark, but I worked with Aboriginal Consultation for Tsutina, which is just outside of Calgary here, for the last 5 years, and I came over to the industry after that. Not because Altalink wanted a token Indian, which is a lot of times what people see and what people are so skeptical against a brown face and as an Aboriginal Relations Advisor, but because I felt that Altalink itself was able to set the bar high and stand behind their word. And to the point where Altalink ended up making a mistake in the field, and industry standard probably would have been to sweep it under the rug. We owned up to it, we took heed for it, but at the same time, we were looking at building the trust, not by saying things and just leaving them at the boardroom table, but going on the ground, going in the field, and taking our lumps when we do mess up, because we do trust that relationship and trust that the relationships we built with First Nations are strong enough to endure even bad times as well as the good times.
There was here one first.
My name's Kieran O'Farkley. I work with Aboriginal people in Australia. The issue of what is consultation in any context, it seems to me that consultation is about choice. It doesn't matter how you do it. It doesn't matter how long you take over it. If at the end of the day there is no choice, if the decision's already been made,
That's a good point.
Yes, that's a very good point.
consultation does not happen. Martin, if I had to summarise the UN Declaration in about 10 words, it is Indigenous people must be able to choose. They must be able to choose whether to have development. If there is development, they must be able to choose in what form it should take. They must be able to choose how to express their culture. They must be able to define their culture. Right? It must be about choice. It seems to me that if we're going to talk about consultation, we cannot do it properly without, and this has been implicit in a lot of what people have been saying, but we've got to make it explicit, that if there is no choice, if government is consulting about Bill 22, when Bill 22 has already been drafted, there is no consultation. One concrete idea about what impact assessment practitioners can do. Impact assessments are supposed to consider alternatives. They very rarely do consider real alternatives. Most impact assessments will have about 3 pages on the no development alternative. One thing that impact assessment practitioners could start doing is to take the duty to set out alternatives seriously. To start forcing people to face the fact that there are alternatives. Just one question. As a very interested observer of Canada, I'm really surprised that either in the written material or in all the comments so far, nobody has used the word accommodation. Now, I understand that accommodation has particular legal connotations in Canada, but as a word, and someone talked about the power of language, as a word to me, accommodation is quite powerful and quite different to consultation.
I said accommodation. As in, you're going to mitigate or accommodate, right? And that's where you legitimately say, we're going to move the pipeline out of your aquifer.
Okay, I'm sorry. I missed
No, that's
that,
okay.
but-
No,
but
I just think it's
general-
a really good point. Like, it's
Yeah.
a really strong point.
Yeah. So, because to me, in just using the word, to me, if I say that I accommodate, it means I have to change my position. I have to move. If it's to allow an oral culture to express itself orally, if I am to accommodate, it means I have to change. So given the prominence of the word accommodate in some recent judgments in Canada, I'm really surprised that I haven't heard a lot more about accommodation, and I think that would be helpful.
We have Ben over there, and then
Thank you. My name is Ben Cave. I come from England. I should declare immediately I'm speaking from a position of ignorance. I would like to respond to the challenge you threw down, though. Steve put a very wise question of how we can look at this and learn about consultation generally. You also said, Steve, that there are no First Nation people in Europe. There are. They're the Roma, the Gypsy traveller people, who are consistently disenfranchised and marginalised. And now, from my ignorance, I don't want to paint too bleak a picture, because I think there is good practice in working with, listening to, understanding Gypsy Roma people. But they also suffer horrifically. And all the impact assessments I've been involved in, they have been marginal, they have been spoken of as a problem, and if you are to, and it's almost, if you're seeking to get the will of the community, the understanding from the community, that's the settled community you're talking about. You're not talking about the people who will move around and who are seen as problematic and whose understanding is different. So I would be interested to hear if there are people in the room who know about the European experience and can speak more knowledgeably than I. But I just lay that down, really. That's my point.
Before going to, let's go to Steve, and then who of the speakers would like to talk after? Well,
It's my turn?
yes, and then we'll be back.
We are in the ignorant section now, so that's very nice.
At least we are starting to find our identity.
Yeah.
North America is called a peanut gallery.
I just wanted to make a suggestion, because when I'm hearing here, and I think you were talking about choice, you were talking about trust, it's also, I think, about understanding. And there are a lot of people, also non-native people, I have to get rid of that word, non-First Nation people, who understand because they are knowledgeable, they are trained, but a lot of us is not. And I was in the lucky position that this weekend I was welcomed and invited by the First Nation people of Fort McKay to join their community. I was welcomed by Holly and amongst others, and she presented a 2-hour, 1.5-hour talk just about day in McKay. It was not about impact assessment.
I've never told you it's
Ignorant, you know. Mackay. Thank you, Holly. But it was not about, the talk was not about impact assessment. It was not about involvement at all. It was just about giving me, as ignorant person, an insight in what it means to be part of that community. And my suggestion, now I will be concrete, would be for next conference to try to find a slot to just pick 1.5 hour and invite one speaker and, from a First Nation group and just tell about their life. Not in relation to impact assessment, just let other people experience what it means to be a member of a community of a First Nation or Aboriginal people. So that's what I want to contribute, because it helped me very much. And I want to thank people from Mackay for welcoming me, because it was a very nice experience.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, there is First Nations they used to be in Jasper. They were expelled from there when the park was created, and they are surrounded by mining on one side and oil development in the other side, and they are trying to work with people, decision makers from the companies around, inviting them to spend 5 days in their community, living with them, so they can start to feel what is to be part of the community. And I think that could be a good example to bring to other farms. So, and
I would like to speak about this issue of people being landless and go back to the Métis Nation experience in Canada, is that we're recognized in the Canadian Constitution as Aboriginal peoples of Canada. And so in Alberta, there are 8 Métis settlements, but in the rest of the country, the Métis Nation has no recognized land. So it's incumbent upon the Métis people to demonstrate to any project proponent that there's an impact on the traditional way of life. And it's very difficult to do that. And when, if it's a federally regulated project, they're starting to require companies to consult with Métis communities. But the provinces are doing a dreadful, dismal job. And companies are just going along with it. It's just fine. Alberta's got this new proposed consultation policy, and I remember 2 years ago hearing that executive director speak somewhere, and I put my hand up and I said, do you have anything about the Métis? Because they call it an Aboriginal consultation policy, and it's First Nations consultation. And they said, no, we're working on it, we'll get something out soon. And then I just saw the guy speak again at a CAP meeting, and I said, what about the Métis consultation policy? Well, we're gonna open our office this September, and we'll start working on it then. And, I think companies or governments with some kind of foresight are recognizing ahead of time that it's time to go and speak to the Métis communities, find them, find where they are, find what they do. We have organizations, we have leaders, and do it before the court makes you do it, because you'll be a lot better received. And I thought of that because I think there's some sort of a parallel there.
Not to paint a really dismal picture, but I have experience here in Alberta and working with a proponent who saw, there's an Aboriginal consultation guideline, there's nothing for Métis, we want to be proactive, we're going to meet with Métis. The Region 1 and Zone 2 have a policy that they're drafting for how they would like to be consulted. And when this proponent went through all this work and I think, put an excellent effort forward in trying to make sure everyone was treated in the same way, the provincial government actually asked that they don't provide their consultation reports to them because they have no ability to deal or make any sort of judgment. And so this is the environment that we're dealing with.
Yeah. Sorry, just a quick comment. If you're talking about the same executive director that I think you're talking about, the same guy basically said that Alberta would prefer to see a lot of these consultation issues dealt with in the courts rather than actually being consulted. And that was it was actually for the creation of the super board, but someone had brought up the issue, and that's essentially what Alberta's thought was, or at least the leader of that group, what his thought was. So,
which is what Trudeau said in the 60s to the BC First Nations, take us to court. We've got all the resources, and we can keep you in court for years. It's really discouraging.
Okay, first, there is a person here. Sorry, what's your name? Here? Yes. He and then...
Thank you. My name is Marit, and I come from Norway and belong to the Indigenous people of Norway, which is in Europe, I think. So perhaps
not so much, maybe I should say. There's not so much different people. That's what I meant. I don't, because now everyone is saying there are, of course, there are indigenous people in Europe, but not in every country and in several the same way. So I didn't want to be insulted to any indigenous people at all.
Okay. The Sami people live in 4 nation states in Europe. Norway, Sweden, Finland and Russia. But it's only Norway that has acknowledged us as indigenous. So you can tell every Swede and Finnish person you meet after that. I just want to say also that I'm very grateful I went to this conference and I have been listening to indigenous persons here, First Nation persons, every day, and now it's the 3rd day of the conference. Even before the conference, I have listened a lot, and I will not tell anything about our traditions, traditional knowledge, or what we have achieved by our own Sami parliament and how we do impact assessments and so on. Because it's a different culture, it's a different state, everything is different history, everything. So I'm just sitting here and learning, and I'm very grateful to listen to this conversation. And I would also say that we do take part in the I Don't Know More movement back home. Yeah. So in the end, I just want to tell you about my impression about this conference. At least from the session I have attended, it's a lot talk about oil and oil sand and so on. And most of those presentations give us the impression that oil is as white and innocent as a newborn lamb. Yes, it's just amazing how unproblematic the whole oil industry is. If it hadn't been for those annoying indigenous people that goes everywhere where they want to be. And I even heard people on panels say that indigenous people don't know anything. They have lost their traditions, they don't know anything about the modern world, they don't want to understand, they don't want this, they don't want that, and well, to take a phrase from back home, they were lucky I didn't waterboard them in the toilet. So I just want to say, keep up the good fight.
Thank you.
And I think it's very important that indigenous people are in these types of conferences. And never should stop going here, because they should always be visible. Thank you.
Thank you. That's good. That was really good.
My English is not that good.
No, it's very good.
That's why I love it.
Good enough.
I guess, like, for me, just to sum up for myself, I live and practice a very traditional way of life in my own personal life. I've been a sun dancer and a faster, and I go every year. But I also have to live in the corporate world in Calgary, in this rat race. And it is a rat race, Calgary is. Very competitive and extremely challenging, being a visible minority. But what helps me in my life is knowing that I have a place to go where I can be reminded and humbled by very simple things in my life. Sweats, rocks and water can bring me to my knees. And there is a creator that's looking over me and all of you. But I need that in my life. When I like living in two worlds and working with industry and you know, being in this rat race, it's really difficult at times.
And the network, you have a pretty reasonable network of people who are living the same life, kind of like
Yeah, I have a very, very large support network.
Yeah.
But for the most part, they practice a traditional way of life exclusively. Yes, they interact when requested with mainstream, but not in this way. But it's really important for me as an Aboriginal person to have that as a foundation. So that's a little bit. If you wanted to hear something personal.
Yeah, because all is about people, I think. So from just the kind of talk about
Just to wrap up, my final comments would be, I think a paradigm shift is really, really important. Those government officials you were talking about who have that old frame of attitude, or particular company managers, or even the odd vice president or CEO who isn't willing to really try to understand the community's interests and needs. That is this entire group here, this international association, us as practitioners and people out there need to push that for that kind of paradigm shift.
the UN Declaration on Indigenous Peoples' Rights, we have to push that, we have to remind them, because consultation in the courts is from anything, if it's sort of very minor impact on existing rights, is the courts said even notification is enough. That matrix model that the one gentleman talked about, you know, just notification all the way to some pretty deep meaningful consultation. That's a pretty high level on that one end on that spectrum. But the UN Declaration, up here, it's a whole different bar, free, prior, and informed consent. So we need to push that. Indigenous community leaders need to use it in their language all the time. You publish anything related to Indigenous things, make sure you use that language. So we start to make that change. I guess the other paradigm shift is sort of the comment our Sami friend said, you know, our consumer society, our no ethic of thanks, no ethic of the relationship to the land and so on. I think Indigenous knowledges can really help scientists, people generally around the world, to look at life differently and society differently. I think we've got to push on all those paradigm shifts.
You know, one of the things that back home that we run into a lot in regards to being consulted. And then when we do have issues with that consultation process, and we take that to the court, our bands spend hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to fight that, only to be worn out, financially, emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally. And that's what the government's very good at doing, is wearing us down. But you want to know what? The 550 whatever year resistance. And I believe that resistance is human spirit. And I believe what I'm hearing around in this room is that Indigenous people do and will always have a special relationship with earth and sky. And I believe that that's why a lot of people are attracted to our people, because they recognize that. And they know when they turn on the TV, that's all they see. They see these global catastrophes that are happening out there with the oceans, with on and on and on. And back home, that's what gives me hope, is by going to the ceremonies, by going to pray, going to sit with the ancestors, with the spirits, going to fast, even as hard as that is, going 4 days without food or water. I'll do it. And if it means that my life is going to be compromised for that, then so be it. But you want to know what? I believe that our ancestors, boy, when I think about what they had to go through, we jump in a car and go a block, and we gotta drive it. You know, our people used to travel on the rivers. Our people were runners. They were just powerful people. And again, it's something that I believe that in human rights, that our health and well-being as human beings, we're forgetting about that. We're forgetting about taking the government to court over our health and our wellness and our being. I don't know how to do that back home with industry. I can't blame Goldcorp, because Goldcorp's only been there 7 years. Who do I blame that 100 years of mining on? Our First Nations have only been involved in those discussions in maybe the last 7 years, because the government says that we have to be consulted.
Because it took the government to court, that's why you're being consulted. Because a lot of your groups took the government to court.
So I think basically my closing statement here is that I believe that what industry is doing is that we need to basically, as very intelligent people, as a collective, to look at the health impacts that are affecting us as human beings. What does that look like today? And what's that going to look like in the future? Because you want to know what? I'm scared. I'm scared of what I'm seeing. And if we don't change, we're all going to pay. Irregardless, we can have all the money in the world, we can have all the intelligence in the world, and all the wisdom in the world. But if you don't start making people accountable for what they're doing to human life. And you want to know what? I believe that we have the intelligence, even just this room alone, that could actually make. I think that's one thing that we need to do is to sort of somewhat embarrass the Canadian government into recognizing that what it's doing is wrong. It's just right wrong what they're doing to our rivers, our lakes, our oceans, our animals, all that life, to future generations. I believe that we also need to encourage industry and corporations and government that the billions of dollars that are being made off of our land, that they should be putting a portion of that towards the better technology and science to help us to move into the future, because that's what it's going to take. They ain't going to go anywhere. They're not going to go away. They won't go away. But I think that we can encourage a change like this, like my brother over here, who's sitting at a table he's trying to help them to make that change. It's like for myself, sitting at a table with the world's second largest mining gold company. When I agreed to do that, and I'm going, oh, I wonder how many hatchets and arrows I'm going to have to pull out of my back on this one. You're a traitor. No, somebody's got to get up and speak. And that's exactly what I've done, is I've gone up and I've taken a risk. I've taken a serious risk. And my credibility. Because, well, I know what some of my Sundance family looked at me it took 3 years for them to get it. Prior to when I first started, I said, oh, that Martin, he's in back of Walmart doing shake tents and doing ceremony, and we don't know what the heck he's doing back there. Now all of a sudden they're going, yay, Martin, go. Because they finally recognize that what I'm doing is I'm not selling out. Somebody has to bring a voice to the table. Somebody has to help people like Mary, who are reconnecting back to her roots. She's offered tobacco to apprentice, and she's relearning a part of who she is. And that's beautiful. And so I believe that people from my home, from my community, are very lucky to have somebody like Mary that's able to take the punches, because she has. We sat with the elders and we cried and we've gotten angry together, but we're still moving forward. We're still moving ahead, even though we've been smashed around a lot, but that's okay. But my point being is that I believe that we need to make people more accountable for our well-being, our health, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually,
Marie and you, okay? Marie. Sorry. She was at the back, so we didn't see.
Hi, my name is Mary. This is the first time I've been at an IAIA conference, and I didn't even realize that this group existed. But being here, I'm seeing the power and the opportunity and the potential for what can happen. What I would like to see is that the people from the companies that we work for need to be here. I've got a big environmental team that I work with in my operation, and I'd like to see them here. So they need to know more about this, and that's why I can get them here. The other thing I'd like to see is that every time one of us is going to talk at this conference, for example, maybe that needs to become more the way we do things, about our relations, about the work that we're doing with First Nations or Aboriginal people, no matter where we are in the world, because we are everywhere in this world with the same kind of concerns and interests and beliefs at the core of us, that we bring those representatives with us to this, and that this conference welcomed that. And maybe it's by having those sweat lodges or those ceremonies available to give us that quiet space to go to as part of the proceedings, or as part of, or a day ahead of time, whatever it is, because that's how we're going to build our strength. We've got all the answers. We just have to put them together. And we have to keep talking like this, because it's hard, but we've got to keep talking. And this is, I just believe that this is a forum that can really happen. So I appreciate the leadership of evangelists to make that happen.
Thank you. So who else?
Hi, my name's Colin. I'm from the west coast of Canada, and I live and work there. I apologize, I'm fairly late in the conversation. I just wanted to share the insights I'm hearing, or some of the words I'm hearing, and some of my experience on the west coast with the Coast Salish people. I hear a lot about listening and hearing and understanding and building connections, and that's on the science level, the quote-unquote science level, as well as the cultural level. And taking the time to listen and understand, and across cultures, across peoples, across experiences. And there's a lot of process around, formal process in the legal system, an EEI process designed formally to get that. And there's lots of problems with that. And in a lot of the tools we talk about are ways to get better at that. The Coast Salish have a tradition where an elder is a witness to all important meetings, and the elder's role is not to participate or to testify or be part of the meeting, but to listen and observe and think and take time. And there's time made at every meeting, at the end of the day, and as much time as that witness needs to tell the stories that they feel are important after what they've heard. And I've seen it being very, very powerful in terms of making connections, building understandings, and bringing new insights from, rather than being engaged in the to and the fro and the battles and the roles. And I see more and more traditions coming at you see at workshops like this one, where there's a drumming ceremony, there's a welcome to the territories, then the meeting starts and that's forgotten. And there may be even a prayer at the end, and it's the start and the finish. It's the what happens in the middle, and the witness and the role of the witness, and that bringing that forward is very, very powerful. I've seen it a number of times in building the connections and understanding. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you. So this is 5:45, so as ready to be the last speaker, and then our volunteers take notes just to summarize key points and maybe bring some ideas. But just to tell, so the points, okay, so what can we do now? Okay, so we have here different ideas. Ray Crutchfield will tell a few more. So what's next? So I need some guidance. I guess for your help and guidance. Yeah, maybe we can, but let's, please.
Okay. Well, I just want to also say that in Norway, we come from a spirit or a belief system that we call a collective. We need to work together to survive. When we talk about collective, we talk about getting authorities from the creation for us to survive. And once you're given that authority, then it's a collective stewardship, ownership of that collective right. And we use those collective rights to survive. Now, today we've heard a lot, and I think about other creations that we call equal to us, plants and animals. And we're talking about even reclaiming sites that spirits have gone. Those sites are part of that collective. We need to use our ceremonies to bring that collective spirit back and make that site alive. How do we, as First Nations, we know how to do it. We know how to have our processes and practices to do that. But I think those are important concepts that we need to understand. How do we bring back that spirit? We need to, I see this conference in that concept. I see the concept of collective. We've come from many different parts of the world to learn, to listen, to understand, and even to contribute to the discussion. And all that is in the spirit of collectiveness. Now we gotta go in. How do we move from this direction on? I think is important. We need to talk about where do we go from here. Some of the suggestions that came out with the communities being able to share their information and hearing those stories are so important, because there is so many stories in the communities that we can learn from, and hearing from our cultural experts, our cultural technicians, our cultural elders, our cultural knowledge holders. Those are people we need to tap into. They're also resources. So we need to start looking at how do we develop a team to be able to share this information, but also culturally interpret, so that we can both understand the direction that we're going. Most of the times we're all moving in the same direction, but we're not understanding the different practices that we do follow. So I think with First Nation, my experience has been there's not enough technicians to be able to share information. And the few that they are, the demands are so high. You're constantly called to different locations. So I think we need to start looking at engaging those technicians and looking at how do we train those technicians to move ahead. So those are just some of my comments.
Just something that I thought of yesterday. We went out for dinner last night. We were sitting, that was the Indigenous group that got together. So I'm looking around the table and I'm going, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, and stop. Okay. And I thought, okay, who's sitting at the table? We had Hydro-Quebec, we had some other corporations sitting at the table, we had consulting companies sitting at the table, and I'm going, okay, where's your representative that you brought with you? Mary Goldcorp brought me. She's actually, I don't know if I should say Goldcorp, but the University of Waterloo. But anyway, they did bring a representative as a tertiary practitioner. And I think we need to encourage the people all the people that have come here to this international event should take a little bit of money out of what they have. I think they can afford it to bring somebody from the community or somebody from a village or a town or a city. Bring them with you. Support them, encourage them to be a part of what this elder is talking about here. I think if we can do that, and you want to know it, I think we'll achieve what our elders requested to.
Just want to make a really brief comment. I had I brought a presentation here and some of the key points that we wanted to put forward and look at some of the recommendations which should be sound in moving forward, but I just wanted to quickly share a quick message from the chief. He was talking about when we were going into these consultation meetings, this elder came up to him and said, hey, we need help. I keep having this dream. The animals are coming to me and telling me, and asking me for help. So, the waters are starting to warm up, the fish, are having trouble. And the animals, they're getting pushed out, and they're imploring this elder to talk to somebody to help them. So my hope, I guess, is just, some of these recommendations from this impact assessment will go a long way towards helping those animals who need our help.
We need to But I think that one thing we also need to work is to bring more spirituality to this series of conference. And my grandmother, who is the most important spirit in my life, she died when I was coming here to study my PhD. And like my brothers here that struggled with drugs and alcohol, my brother was struggling with the same. And he caused the accident where my grandmother died. But I know she died because she thought that going that trip could help and save my brother from addictions. So the suffering goes everywhere. And when I was here and I was in my cancer journey, she was in my dreams a lot. She gave me peace and told me that one thing was suffering, the other was pain. But in my dreams, she was crying because we were in our small community, and she was looking at a beautiful, huge tree, and she was crying because we knew that somebody was going to cut that tree. And there was her very humble choza, just made of wood, and we knew that that could be destroyed. And I think for me, how many people don't believe in spirits? But some of us knew that they are real, and even people that have passed away, they have not left us. They are with us. And I think that's something that we need to keep telling and not be ashamed to share what the spirits are telling us, because through us they are speaking. Be the spirits of the animals, be the spirits of our ancestors. We are those that can keep their voice here. We need to start working together and trusting each other to see, okay, this cannot stop here. This has to start growing like a seed. So we are almost in the established time here, and in other settings we still have 6 minutes. But my invitation is so my email is in some of the sheets that were distributed earlier, but I have some business cards there. I think somebody else wants to talk. Yes, I'll do that. So we need to form a group, that collective that has been mentioned here by Martin, by Greg. We need to create that collective, and I hope from here some of us will start building that collective to see, okay, how can we start moving forward in some of these ideas. And I know there are people interested. It doesn't matter if we are Aboriginal or not. You say we are all human beings, and we are the stewards of this planet, so we have to start building on that. So I go here from one comment.
Hi, kia ora tātou. I'm late. I've learned a couple of things from the conference. Yesterday I was presenting, but seems all the people I wanted to present to were in other sessions because all the Indigenous presentations were at the same time. Today that I learned don't get captured. I've been captured and I escaped, and that's why I was late. I got sort of boxed into another session and couldn't get out, but I'm out. And so maybe I got here at the right time, just listening to what's going on and thinking about what I wanted from this conference, but maybe what I haven't been able to get is the connections with the Indigenous peoples from different places. I'm from Māori, from Aotearoa, New Zealand. Maybe what we say around this conference, when it is in Chile next year, is that there's a full day where Indigenous practitioners can come and we work on a specific issue that is nominated by the Haukanga, from the people from there. They identify a specific issue that we work on, and we just work on collectively for the day. And I think for me that would actually be at least as beneficial as the presentations, because it's all one-way traffic, and you get a chance to ask a question or something, but the discussion is cut off before it really gets into the deep issues. So maybe if we were just able to do, and then we get a chance to be ourselves and contribute what we can and learn from that participation. Kia ora.
Thank you. So we'll bring especially that idea of, well, let's ask the board of IAIA and the organizers of the future event to tell the companies to bring someone from the communities, because we know otherwise they can't afford to do that. And we need their voice, we need their wisdom. So I will ask Fred Crusher to give a closing prayer for this session. We just ask for blessing and wisdom for all of us. Hey.
Like the old people would say, we acknowledge Creator, but it's also the spirit of the happy way you left your door to come to this conference that we call on Creator to bring you back into your door with more knowledge and more happiness so that you can share it with your families and your relatives and your community. So those are just some of the words that I've always learned from the elders or the ceremonialists that I've heard pray all while I was growing. Oh, kahe, hai stibet. Oh, gat Christi quick, hai gacha min skat. Ika gat pio nui stop you. Hai stibet pio no watchimo tio sino mocht gooi aan ik manis skudata. Mag kita manis ka ki manis stibet pio ba ko kita spumuki. Hai stibet pio no watchimo isk. Hani gedaan dat toch gewoon ik mag genieten om een stap op taxia. Had ik genieten om een stiga die maar jou is die bij de bierwacht kan zo kopen. Hij is die bij de bier toch wat ze moest kapen ze toch die wat ik niet dame kan moeten ik. En dat die naam schouw dat zie dame kan je niet meer dag gooien niet maar. Had toch door Christi kom. Oh, is die bij de bier kan ook ze skat open in kamer moeten ik. Nesta watchman, we sami bada pivosin. Og I pitpustivosin. Anja.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being here with us. And well, in Alberta, I learned they say happy trades. Happy trades coming back. And muchas gracias por su participación. Thank you very much.